the extended recording in progress. Welcome back to the second half of our season. Our extended season 2 is so excited to have you back. It's a lovely kind of burst of energy in the room. I really have missed these Thursday conversations. And we're excited today to be joined by Dr. Ellie Nixon and Norman Taylor, along with our curator, Amy Russell, our co-conspirator, who will be talking about theatre pedagogy. I'll see you so far. Of course, we like for everyone, if possible, to be visible and say hello and to engage. Please feel free to drop messages or to comment in the chat window. Amy will try and keep an eye on that and kind of get the juicy conversation going among us. Yeah, Amy, Norman, Eddie, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you all so much for coming. We had been expecting nobody, and then then all of a sudden everybody turned up. So what a thrill! What a great thing. So I'm very pleased to initiate this second part of our second season with the discussion that I've been having already with my two dear friends, Norman Taylor and Ellie Nixon. And so our interest is to just sort of be totally transparent about how this came about. We are working together on a pedagogic training at Embodied Poetics, which basically is a kind of, it's very, very based on the Lecoq pedagogy, Lecoq, Capot, and Bing. And as we were discussing, we were choosing words, and we realized that the word pedagogy is really very important to us. And we were thinking about other words like training, like method, like technique, curriculum, etc. And thought that was actually quite an interesting discussion to open out to everyone to see what we think about these words. We have identified 4 things that we think are really essential to us when we think about pedagogy. And we're going to sort of expound for a while, which is the Unrehearsed Futures pattern. We'll sort of talk among ourselves for about half an hour and then really open it out to you in the hopes that we'll have a very productive and informal discussion. At that point, the recording will stop, so you can feel free to brainstorm, think about things openly. You won't be recorded forever. Your ums and hums will not be recorded. With that said, I would like to ask Norman and Ellie to introduce themselves briefly. Their biographies are also in the chat. But Ellie, would you introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, hello, and thank you so much for coming. And thank you for inviting me, Amy, and the team to this. It's a brilliant forum for discussing ideas and practices. And I found it a fascinating space for discovering what we're doing and thinking about beyond the narrowness of my current role. So it's invited me to rethink and question my own practices. I'm a theatre director, actor, and teacher. And in 1989, a long time ago, I co-founded the La Mancha Theatre Company with the Chilean director and teacher Rodrigo Malbran. And in 1995, we co-founded La Mancha International School of Image and Gesture in Santiago, Chile. And I believe that some people from La Mancha are here today, so bienvenidos. I'm currently the subject leader of BA Acting at Bath Spa University here in the UK. And the focus of our discussion today is such a timely and deeply important area of concern for the brilliant teaching team I have. So that's me.
Great, thank you, Ellie. Norman, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would. My name is Norman Taylor. I just said I analyze everything, right? You can analyze everything, but be careful. Don't analyze everything always, otherwise you go mad. That. I was born in a little village and I did various jobs, even chauffeuring and farm working before I trained to be a teacher. I was a teacher of French in secondary schools. Then I went into primary school. And then unfortunately, or fortunately, a friend of mine who was a writer, he pushed me to do some training in theatre, you see, and okay, I don't mind. And then he pushed me to apply to Lecoq, the school in Paris, you see, which I did, and I got a place there. And, you know, surprise, surprise, I went there and I completed the 2 years. And at the end of that, we made some shows together, me and 2 others, and then I went away, and then 2 of us went back to do the 3rd year, and at the end of the 3rd year in 1982, Jacques Lecoq asked me to be a teacher at his school, and that was another surprise for me. So I started teaching movement, as you always do. Then you go on to improvisation, and then little by little, the world of analytical movement opened up. And then when Jacques Lecoq died in 1999, well, I stayed there a little bit longer. Then I moved country. I went to Belgium because of Marie-Noël, of course. And then I started working independently, more independently. And it's very curious because I was a sort of an apprentice to Jacques Lecoq for 19 years, 18, 19 years. And then that apprenticeship, following the teacher, right? No gods, no masters. And then when I started to work, then this world just expanded, you see, and it is absolutely infinite. And if you know what you do, then if we know what we do, then we can do what we want. It wasn't Lecoq who said that, but someone else, and that always motivates me. And nobody can make a mistake. You know, when you're teaching, nobody makes a mistake. Some of the students say they want to learn to do the movement properly, so I tell them to go and wash their hands and brush their hair and that sort of thing as a joke. But you know, we always do the movements properly. See that? So that's basically me.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And you've segued to our first, the first thing we wanted to talk about, which is a focus in pedagogy on what you're pointing out, which is process, as opposed to achievement of certain technical goals. I mean, it's not that technique isn't included, but it's really process led. And so, Ellie, you were going to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I really was aware in the last session that we had that there was some very insightful thinking about process-led and results-led approaches to teaching theatre and performance, and which really opened up possibilities to me for thinking about theatre pedagogy, which prompts the bigger questions, you know, about how we teach, where we teach, what we teach, and who we teach. And of course, in these conversations, there's a danger of making overgeneralized statements, but having worked at La Mancha, which sits independently outside a national government higher education framework, and then having worked in higher education institutions where the conditions are entirely different, I'm thinking that pedagogy really, part of pedagogy is about listening and watching and being watchful of these contexts. And in my experience as a practitioner and teacher, some students become overwhelmed by doubt when trying something new or working without a clear outcome, kind of, what will happen if I make a mistake? How can I try if I don't know what I'm supposed to do? And I often think about the sociologist Frank Furedi's definition of the precautionary principle, whereby it's best not to take a new risk unless its outcome can be understood in advance. And I think pedagogy is about the doubt, the questioning. It's absolutely about inquiry rather than mastery. So I'm really interested in people's visions and views and experiences of inquiry-based pedagogy. So I see pedagogy as a voyage of mutual discovery. Somewhere Lecoq said, I think I'm paraphrasing, I don't consider any of my teaching sessions a success unless I've also learned something important from the students too. So it's the process-led approach, I think, leads to a really rich engagement where the educators are learning at the same time.
Wonderful. Norman, would you like to add anything?
No, I always have a problem with doubt and questioning. If you say doubt and questioning, I realize that doubt goes towards a question, always. See that?
Yeah.
And if doubt doesn't go towards a question, you can't. There's no way out to doubt. But the way you talked about it now, I just realized so I learned something today. If you have a doubt about something, look for a question. You'll find a question, and then you can learn something. That's good. Great. Listening and watching, right? Not hearing and seeing, listening and watching, right? When you're on stage, you want people to watch you and listen. You don't want them just to hear you and see you occasionally. You see that? And there, with our program, and other people's programs, and based on Lecoq, you can learn how to be watched and how to be listened to. That was brilliant. Yeah, that's what I have to add to that.
Yeah, wonderful. And that brings us to the next point, which is that it is a cumulative process. And there, Norman, what you're speaking to is a sort of cumulative aspect also of technique. And I think you're going to treat us to a lecture demo, which is very exciting. So take it away.
Okay, great. I think in our previous Unrehearsed Futures, I talked about the swinging of the Indian clubs, right, as an exercise. We do it like, oh, I have to do this because I have to have something in my hands real before I go into the abstract, right? Now, some weeks ago, watching television one evening, there was a series on television, I think it was a German series, and there's this woman, she was in a big forest, right? And then alone with a dog, she heard something, and then she went behind a rock, and then she came out again. And I watched this on television, and my reaction was, she needs training. She needs a pedagogy with training in it, because she didn't act that time. Let me just show you a little bit of what she did. Right. This is a rock. Okay, you can see that. And what she did was, she was in the forest, and she left, and then she came back. Okay, and I thought, yeah, okay, yeah, but she needs some teaching, because, you know, I mean, what do we see, or what can we see every day if we want? We can see the sunrise and the sunset. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you imagine that one of your arms is the horizon, so we're going to do it. One of your arms is the horizon, and the other arm has a hand, and that is going to be the sun, which rises, travels, and then sets. So each for yourself, please, one arm is the horizon, and then the other hand is the sun, which rises, travels, and then sets. Can you do that, please? I've got Aidan on that, great man. Great, great. Aidan, can I imitate you, Aidan? Yes, yes. Okay, Aidan, this is great, because Aidan did this, right? He was there, right? He came up. The sun changed his mind and went down again. Right? Okay, no, I know what you want, but you see, what we all do, what everybody does is, it comes up, and then it comes down. Great. Which means that we have to deal with what we see and how we see it. Now, we know that what happens is this, right? We know that, but we don't see that. We see this. So we have to deal with what we see and how we see it. I mean, when you do the movement of the aeolian windmills that create electricity, and you say, what do? People do this. So I put them on the side, and they do this. It is absolutely, totally wrong, because what we see is this. And when the blade comes to here, it accelerates, and then slows down. That's what we see. And so if you do this for these windmills that generate electricity, you're blind, or you can't see, you don't see. And we know that there is an acceleration. But if we come back to the sunshine, if we are there, okay, if you're looking at sunrise, be very, very careful. Because if the sky is clear when the sun rises, you're going to be blinded. Because suddenly there's light. And the sun does not rise like that. There is a jump. Suddenly there's light. Right? And if you just go up, no, it's suddenly there's light. And then it travels up, is connected to the horizon, and suddenly it is not connected to the horizon. So there are two jumps in the sun. That's what we see. And if you do the horizon going down, it's exactly the same. Right? Each for yourself, can you now, please, You have the same exercise and just do the, it comes up, jump, suddenly the sun. Off you go, Eden. No. Suddenly the sun. Too much sun at the beginning. You got it. There's too much. Now, can I imitate you? You watch what Aiden did. Right? Right? He has text and emotion and space in that movement. Hello? You see that? You see that? But the sun is big at the beginning and then it gets smaller. Once again, Aiden. It travels up. Boom, right? Now, when you do this the first time, the jumps are too big. But the event, watching you, Aiden, is, can I try and do your smile? Right? God is happy, right? You see that? But we know that there is a jump when the sun arrives and then a jump when it leaves the horizon. So when you leave and when you come back, if there is no event, it is not the real world. And anybody can do that. If you watch The King's Speech, famous film, Geoffrey Rush and Colin Firth, there's a moment when Colin Firth goes out of the room into his kitchen and he's just been informed that it's the king. I think it's that moment. And he goes out, right? And then he comes back in. And that film is brilliantly acted because when he goes out, he creates a space, but he has the feeling of sunset. And you can feel in the space on the picture there, you can feel it grows. It becomes more dense. And you realize in your unconscious, subconscious, that something has happened psychologically for him. And when he comes back in, you know what it is. And he used going out and coming back as sunrise and sunset, sunset and sunrise. This is something you can observe if you want. And on the film, the series I saw, of course, the lady actor, she didn't mark that moment. You don't have to say boom or boom, not at all. All you need to do, in fact, is really feel it, and you're going to create something. It's simple. It's really simple. It's not easy. Right? And then you go into all sorts of things. You know, when you go out, you can make it as you think, and when you come in, you can do it as you want. Do it as you want, or you can come in. See you? All sorts of things you can do it. And all this is based on sunrise and sunset, which is not a question of opinion, not a question of anything except what happened. Then you put that all together, and then you can do it. And then comes, how do you do it? Right? How do you leave the stage, for example? When I direct, people don't like me directly, probably didn't, I don't do it now. I used to say, don't go off the stage, don't leave the stage. And they said, but Norman, I've got to go out because I've got to change my costume, I've got to change character. I said, yeah, I know. And they went out, I said, come back, no, don't leave the stage. And then one group went, they got a little bit, right? And one said, Norman, what do we got to do? And I said, go somewhere else. Oh, right. You don't leave the stage, you go somewhere else. You never leave the stage. If you have to get off stage, don't leave the stage, go somewhere else. Then come back to a new place because you've got a new character pass. And all of this is really simple. How do you do it? What do you observe? How do you analyze it? What can you state as facts? Now, your job, how do you want to do it? Dead simple like that. Is that clear? Now, I'm going to do it like you do it. I'm a great cricket fan, and Jasprit Bumrah is a bowler for India. When you see him bowl, it's impossible. You can't bowl like that. everybody bowls in a certain technique, but they're their own way. But Jasprit Bumrah, I recorded something on the TV. I'll watch him sometime because it's impossible. You can't do it that way. But he does it, and India beat England. Dead easy. See that? So that is what I do, what I use as observation, analyze it, and how you're going to use it. Okay, thank you, Amy. Good.
Yes, thank you, Norman. Wonderful. So obviously what you're talking about requires quite a bit of technical skill and application. So there's a kind of cumulative progression of technique between the let's say the 2 years of pedagogic development. But you've also just sort of broached the topic of method, which is based on observation. Can you say a little bit more about if the pedagogy that you're involved with is a method, what is methodical about it? How would you describe that as a method? I mean, you've just said quite a bit, I mean, about observation, but if you'd like to say more.
The most important thing is not to formulate an opinion. Right? And that is very difficult because, oh, look, that's good. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, it looks interesting, right? Human beings, we always formulate an opinion. If you can postpone the formulation of an opinion, then you're in the observation. Can you state what happened? You see an accident in the street and you go to court and the driver was charged with reckless driving. Mr. Taylor, can you tell us what happened? Oh yeah, I'd love to. That stupid driver, he was going far too fast, and he must have been drinking or so. I don't know what he. My opinions are absolutely irrelevant. I am a witness from to wit, to know. Right? What do you know from what you have observed? You are the witness. So it's not a question of formulating an opinion when you're teaching. Some teachers say, "Oh, I like that." What I want you to do, I never say that nobody knows what I like, right? Nobody. It's not interesting. So you postpone the formulation of an opinion. That is very important. See that?
Yeah.
And then another thing is, well, if Aidan didn't exist, the world wouldn't exist. It's as simple as that. You see, the world exists because each of us is here. And if one of us didn't exist, then the world would not exist. It is what we see first. The first reaction we have always is what we see. And then what can you observe that, you analyze it, and then you state certain facts. And then how are you going to do it? So it's not in a 1 week workshop, you can't do all that. In fact, you see, but you can't do that. But that's one of the most important things is to postpone the formulation of an opinion. You're going to have an opinion, inevitably, right? But it's not interesting yet. As a teacher, you never have an opinion. You do certain things. It's the objective of each learner, each student, each actor to realize what he, she, they want, whether he, she, or they like that or not. And then you often have people who realize, oh, I need to learn that. That's great. So that's the sort of the method. And I can talk about the.
Let me just pass to Ellie, because Ellie, you have some very interesting things to say about the etymology of the word method and how it relates to pedagogy.
Yeah, I'm going back into the head slightly here, but after years and years and years of practice and teaching, and at La Mancha, when we established the school in Santiago, we began, I think, by transmitting. And by transmitting our own inherited and experience of education, we were very protective of that transmission. And then going back to what I was saying at the beginning, little by little, we started to realize, see and sense how the students were changing, how the environment around us was changing, and culturally as well. We arrived in Chile at the end of an 18-year dictatorship, and it was going through a process of transition, and that enabled us to move from transmitting something to actually developing our own method. And I want to talk about that in terms of its etymological meaning. I'm a bit obsessed by that, because that's how I find a fascinating connection between French and Spanish and English. So La Mancha now has its own method, but it's absolutely foundationally built upon the education that we had, but it's become its own pedagogical space, really. So I'm just doing quite a bit of research about Gaston Bachelard. You may have heard of him. He's the French philosopher of science and imagination, who had a profound influence, I believe, in Lecoq's pedagogy. And I'm really connecting to his view of education as a méthode ouverte. So an open method, or método abierto. So the essential characteristics of that are encapsulated in the etymological sense of method, meta plus hodos. So it suggests the rigor of a structure, which is what Norman just demonstrated, and the indeterminacy carried by its Greek root hodos, methodos, and it mixes personal discovery and conceptual construction. So I sort of define open method as a traveling way, a mutual voyage of discovery between the educator and those being educated. I mean, as Bachelard said, whoever is taught must teach. So an open method in theatre pedagogy, I think, highlights the dynamic between technique and improvisation as a deliberate progression, which is exactly what Norman demonstrated.
That's marvelous. When you mention this rigor of structure, that's something that I think is not always understood about the Lecoq pedagogy, that there is a very rigorous conceptual structure and methodological structure to the 2-year progression. And so that is something I would like to ask Norman about. Having worked with Lecoq for so many years, you would have sat in on so many of those meetings when the pedagogic formula was being carefully modified and altered for the coming year, the coming season. Can you speak to that, the intricacy and the complexity of the pedagogical structure, the rigorous structure that Ellie's referring to?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The first year was, when I was there anyway, Lecoq got to the stage where he says it's made of marble. Right? The first year was not immovable, absolutely not, because the first question I was asked in September was, you got any doubts about the movements? He used the word doubts to say that sometimes, and then he said, what questions is that? And then I realized that I should find some doubts and some questions, but they're very difficult to find. So he took the first year as something which was established, which would move with the people who were coming into the school, the learners, the students, because they brought with them their needs and their time, right? Their time, and each have our own times. I know that. So for Lecoq, the first year was not established. He said it was made of marble. Right now, marble can crack. It's not like metal, anything like that. See, which can crack too. But see that. And then the second year of in the first year it was preparing the land ready for the different territories that were going to come in the second year. The second year could vary according to the students who were there, according to the times that we were living in, and the series of styles could change in order, okay? And then, I always take Mrs. Thatcher as a moment in history, right? When society no longer existed, you had Me Inc. And why did clowning finish in the second year? Not always, but often the end was clowning. Lecoq was not a Thatcherite by any means. I don't think so anyway. So the first year was preparing the land, plowing it up and making everything ready. It was really established. And the second year changed in styles also. When I was a student, early 70s, melodrama was not a style that was taught in the second year. It was just an autocours where we were out for a big laugh. when I came back in the third year, it was a style that was taught in the second year because times had changed. And melodrama was very important then, for various reasons. Obviously, with it's melodramatic. So there was, from the first to the second year, you couldn't do at his school the second year without doing the first year. It's unthinkable. See that? So that was mainly his point of view. So okay, Amy, like that? Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you. And Ellie, it'd be really interesting to hear a bit about how you worked with that structure. You improvised within that structure in the Chilean context. Yeah.
I mean, it's going back to that sense of listening, and I think at the start we had to take hold of the education, and then little by little, talking to the students and interacting with the students, they had really clear interests that over the years have evolved and developed, perhaps particular interests in Buffon, particular interests in storytelling, and increasingly wanting to express their voice and thoughts and feelings about the world that they were growing up in. And I think we learned from the students in the sense that we could listen to them and acknowledge, okay, we started to really focus on particular techniques in the first year. So we did theatre of objects, for example, in space, and then in miniature. And we started to find ways of using the techniques to empower the students to really develop their own voices. And so while we haven't really changed the structure of what we learned, within that structure, there are pockets where you can really let that explode. And it's the students as well that gave us that. So for example, with Buffon, we were living, the school is based in the Andean mountains with tarantulas, snakes, scorpions, earth tremors. There's a lot of nature going on around you all the time and interacting with you, whether you like it or not. And they really took that on board in developing the Buffon, which went beyond or just changed in its emphasis. Very acerbic, very acidic about the culture that they were growing up in. But the Buffons themselves really were nurtured or empowered by their entorno, the world around them. And then it started to make me think, actually, pedagogy is about connecting inner and outer worlds, and how we navigate that transitional journey between absorbing the world, being absorbed by the world, and then how we transpose that into the theatrical dimension. And I think that's what La Mancha is doing so well right now.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So thank you both very much for this exposition. And if you don't mind, I'm going to curate some questions to the room. I'm sorry, I hope I don't catch anybody off guard, but I wanted to ask our colleague Aurélien, if Aurélien, are you there? Aurélien, is he there still? Aurélien, there we go.
Yeah.
Aurélien, I wanted to ask you if you would talk a little bit about when it comes to this very carefully structured curriculum. A parallel curriculum is the LEM, and I don't think it's well understood how the curriculum of the LEM interacts and intersects with the curriculum of the 2 years. You had the great good fortune of doing 2 years of LEM, so you had the good fortune of seeing how a LEM could also interweave in the second year curriculum. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yes. You have caught me off guard.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you. Very early here in the UK. Not that early. Yeah, we did. I mean, it's a funny thing about the second year of the LEM, because we sort of did one term plus a bit, but it was a second year. And what we did, we looked at the passions and created costumes. So we had the chance to give a go to applying what we did in the first year in the LEM applying it to a theatrical. Oh my God, you really got me off guard.
Sorry.
That's all right. To something more theatrical that can be performed, because you don't do any of that in the first year. And so that was very interesting. It was quite tough to do, because I think what was interesting about that second year that we did with Jacques Lecoq was that he was quite challenged by it too, because he didn't obviously plan that. We asked him because there were 8 of us who made it into the second year and were very keen on the LEM. So we sort of pushed him into giving it a go. And so I think he surprised himself a bit, because he always kept the LEM quite apart from the main school, which sort of caused, and Norman may be able to say more about that, but that sort of, some teachers really wanted him to integrate it more. And as far as I understand, I haven't been at the school now, but obviously now the LEM it seems to be more integrated with Pascal running things. And that is that is an interesting thing, because the LEM sort of sits at the very foundation of the school, I feel, and Lecoq's pedagogy. It sort of underpins everything. And the danger of it, that obviously, is that it sits hidden underneath, and so actually having the chance to sort of lift it up and bring it together with other disciplines that are taught in school, that is a great opportunity. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question here.
Yeah, sure. And just for those who don't know the LEM, it's you know, Berlin, you would describe it better than me, but I always sort of say it's a way of manifesting dynamic in tangible visual art, so through construction, so through objects and through drawing. So it's a way in which the dynamics of movement, space, time, and dynamic can be manifested in something other than specifically theatrical performance. So it crosses over into the visual arts. Yeah,
and I often think of it as a sort of a parallel in some ways to Neutral Mask as well, because what Neutral Mask does is sort of in some ways it cleanses you and gets rid of all the thing. And what Norman just said about it, you know, about looking, about watching, about observing, that is where it's really strong as well. It really takes it down to the basics. And we had a little that little conversation we had via email when Norman mentioned Christo, who just I think that the Arc de Triomphe in Paris is wrapped up at the moment, isn't it? And how actually hiding all the details and hiding all the sort of decoration of it and all the beautiful little ornaments that are on it, hiding all of that brings out the true form underneath. And I think it's looking beyond all the things that we pack on and that we add to things, and finding that true essential, whatever it is we're looking for, but really starting on that. And I think that's where that Christo thing was a really interesting little reminder. So thanks for that, Norman. So I think there you go. I hope
Great. Yeah. Because I mean, the LEM, Lecoq asked his pedagogic students to take the LEM if they hadn't done so in the first year, and because it really runs parallel. You explore colors, you explore lights, you know, materials. You're sort of doing it again, but in a sort of different way, a transposed way. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more curated question to the room. When it comes to process, I would like to ask my colleague Giovanni if he might talk about the way in which the process aspect of the pedagogy has dovetailed so marvelously in his work with Gestalt therapeutic methodology. Giovanni, sorry to catch you off guard, would you mind talking about that?
No. Hello. Well, I love etymology too, so I will introduce process, the word. It is the past tense of the verb to proceed. So the process has already happened. Meaning the process is in the past, in the present, and in the future, but it is a non-linear time. So this is very inspiring to me because in Lecoq work, we observe something that has always been there. And a movement has always been there. So there's an element of, he would call this the permanence, the phenomenon that are permanent and you can always observe. So I want to add this internal process that the pedagogy of the school was and is not only a series of steps, the different genres, the territories, and melodrama, clown, bouffon, etc., but also that every day there is a movement class and an impro class. So all throughout the program, every subject or every territory that we study, we always ask the question, how does it move? Not what it is. And this is brilliant because, how does it move? Asking the question, how does it move? And imitating the world, nature, movement, each other. So in that question, how does it move? We will find what it is. And I like to mention here that one of the sources of Lecoq was Marcel Jus, which is a brilliant, absolutely brilliant pedagogue who wrote The Anthropology of Gestures. And he is one of those thinkers that put into the center of the world, the body, and the learning from the body. So the process of Lecoq pedagogy is to learn from the body by engaging the body. And then the mind will come and the understanding will come and text and everything. So I love this thing about what is there has always been there. Even if it's now, it has a permanence in time. It has a duration, that's it. Mm-hmm. The process has a duration that goes from past to present to future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. You've brought us perfectly, Joe, to our the limit of our recording time. So we can all breathe a sigh of relief as the computer informs us that we are stopping the recording